Hi, my name's James Williams and welcome back to my channel. So apologies in advance for another video about XPath, but I've learned a couple of things this week about XPath which I'd love to share with you all. So one of those things is about when we have a numerical key, or at least a key that starts with a number in an object, dealing with that in XPath and particularly in XML and Power Automate turns out to be a bit tricky. But then also I found a really simple way of dealing with an array of objects coming out of an XPath expression in terms of putting that back into a format that Power Automate can use. So if that sounds of interest, please stick around for the rest of this video. So the start of all this was I came across on LinkedIn Ramesh's blog here, which he posted about, where he's simplifying some nested JSON to simpler JSON in Power Automate. A few interesting things caught my eye here. The mention of the word XPath was one of them, but also this bit about dynamically processing numeric keys without errors. So I did wonder what was meant by that, and I'll show you in a bit later in this video. But the first thing that caught my eye was that so Ramesh is taking a compose action here as a simulated data source, and I've copied that into my flow here, where I've got a results property in this top level object. Under that we've got an array of objects, each with a numeric key, and under that are some objects with email designation and name properties. I've actually added a second one in within this numeric key here, just to test out whether we can deal with that in the flow as well. But otherwise I've taken that compose and we've tried to deal with it. And the way Ramesh has dealt with it here, he's got some apply to each loops, some complicated steps going on. But at the end here, you can see that he's basically appending to an array variable with an object each time. So if we look how he's done that, he's got some expressions. So he's taking each property one at a time. He's figuring out what that is from his loop, and he's appending it to that array. So I, of course, as I always like to do, is question, can we get rid of that apply to each loop and do it with a select action, which is obviously way more efficient in terms of Power Automate, not only for speed, but also in terms of the number of Power Platform actions that are consumed by the flow, because every loop of this loop will run each of these actions. So very quickly you build up a lot of actions against your Power Platform consumption. So it's good to keep that to a minimum where possible. So I've done that in this flow. You can see the output here. I've got the compose, which has that same structure of input data. And in the output here, the final one I'll work up to showing you is I've got an array of objects where we've not only preserved those pieces of data from the inner objects here, but we've also added on that key name, so that context, if it was important for any reason, is not lost in the process. So let's have a look how we've done that. So here we are in the flow editor. So the first way I thought of doing this to emulate Ramesh's approach most closely, but just with one select action after the compose, is that I've taken an approach I've taken previously where we've generated a range from 1 to a number with the length of the objects we're interested in. So I've taken an XPath expression here where I've taken the compose, added it into the root property of a blank JSON object, and we've wrapped XML around that. That creates us some XML. I won't go into too much detail about the basics of XPath here, but XPath takes an XML object as one of its inputs and then an expression. The expression here is just 2 forward slashes, which jumps any level of objects further up in the chain and goes to any objects that have that email ID property name like this, that key. And we can count those with this expression. So we'll find out how many objects are in that compose that have that email ID property. And with that 1, 2, 3 in this case, we'll have an array of the numbers 1, 2, and 3, which are the indexes into an array of objects, which we can build in a similar way. So if I take email ID as the first example here, I've done the same thing where I've added the outputs of the compose into XML. And then a very slightly different expression, so we're not counting this time, but within the brackets here, we're looking at all the email ID properties within the whole compose outputs, and then we're with these square brackets, we're taking an index of those, so that's coming from the input 1, 2, or 3, and then that gives us one of those email ID items, and then we're getting the text out of that as well. I'll demonstrate how that works in a second, but of the other two expressions here, basically the same, except we've got designation in the designation property, and we've got name. And because these will always come out in the same order as a result of the XPath expression, we basically build up each one of those objects, and that gets returned in the outer flow. So we go back to this one, select, that builds up those objects in the output. So each one of those in the array comes from the indexes. So that range expression at the start generates this array of numbers 1, 2, 3. We've used that to index into those XML objects. So to see that working a bit clearer, if we look at the XML, I've just got an XML expression here where I've only taken that first parameter to the XPath expression, which is generating that XML. So by using that, we can see the outputs here that we get from that XML expression, and hopping along to xpather.com, we can explore what that looks like. So I'll just paste that in there, click format so we can see what's going on. We've got the root object at the top, we've got the result part from the compose here, and then within that we've got two objects here in that first array, and we've got one object in that second array. So that matches my compose inputs, two objects in that first one, and then one object in the second. And you can already see by looking here that we've got this one starts with a 0, this one starts with a 1. You can already see the beginning of this problem we've got with numeric keys, because those first digits in each case here have been replaced by some Unicode representations of those numbers. And that's actually from the XML step, not from the XPath step, because you can't have a key in XML that starts with a number. So Power Automate here is converting the first digit of those into Unicode, and that's how it's getting around that. But we can demonstrate while we're here the ability to hop around the object. So we could start at the beginning and type in root and then into results and so on. But what XPath allows you to do is put 2 slashes and jump to any level. So if I do email ID in here, you can see that it's found 3 tags here with email ID and the values within them. You can see on the left here that it's pulled those through. I think I'm on Node version here because I like to see what the object is that's coming back. But if I put / on those and do text, you can see on the output that will be just the text that's coming through. So if I take the example there from the select where we're getting email ID, we've put that in brackets and then we've got an index before that text. I can show you what that looks like. So if I put a brackets around that, and I'll just show you what that comes out as in the output. There's those 3 emails again. We can index into those starting at 1 for XPath. We can get any one of those particular emails with an index and then the text value from within that to return to the flow. So that's how the flow with that select action was picking up those values, and we can replace email ID with any other property that we want to pull out. So what I'd like to do is attempt to do the same thing where I'm pulling those inner properties, but without knowing the name of the keys in advance, which will allow me to use the same action for any object represented in the same way, as long as it's got the same structure, so it appears at the same level within the compose. I want an action that will pull out these properties without me knowing the names of these, and ideally one that also keeps in this key name in case that's of some importance down the line. And I actually found the answer to do this in a really easy way while I was looking into that issue with the numeric keys. So here's a Stack Overflow article I found about it. Put the link in the description. So there's a bit of an explanation here about how XML lists those numeric keys starting with some Unicode for the same reason I've just mentioned. they've already provided here a formula that we can use to turn the key that comes back with this at the start of it back into a numeric key. So that's really helpful. I'll use that later on. But what I was really interested to see was the approach they've taken here. So they've used the from value of a select action, and in there they've put an XPath expression. So this XPath expression, this whole post was about returning column names from an object. So here they're returning a node set of objects from an XPath expression, and they're putting that in the from part of a select. So if I go over to here, look at this whole object, select whole object. So what we can do is put an XPath expression in here. So that's the same XML that we've used earlier on. And then I've just used an expression here that returns a node set. So what's that returning? If I put the same expression in here, so 2/ result, so that's returning at the moment the same from the compose, where we've got one top level object here with two sub objects, and then we've got the second one here with just one inside. But if I do another slash and then an asterisk here to say that I want all the objects a level below that, I get the right number here. So this is 3 nodes. As you can see, they're being highlighted as I hover over them here. 3 nodes, each having the outer property name, and within it all those email properties. So if I use that as the input to my from parameter, what was being shown in that article was that you can refer to the item. So in the map property of the select action, that item there is actually XML that you can use as the input to more XPath expressions. So you can do really short XPath expressions in Power Automate that refer to the items coming out here. So let's take a look at that. So all I've done in this select whole object action here is I've got that XPath expression at the top, where we're putting the compose in, we're getting all the results and one layer under. And then in the map output here, all I've done is taken the item, and because that's XML, I can put it back into a Power Automate native object by wrapping JSON around that. So rather than XML, that should show us the object that's being returned, so the node set that's being returned from XPath. So if I go into the output, and I'll take select whole object, so we can see the from here, this is the output from the XPath expression. So like we've seen before on this channel, that's an array of objects. These are actually all XML objects, as you can see from the content type property of them. And this content is the base 64 encoded XML, where previously we've managed to deal with an array like this by concatenating all these strings together and dealing with the padding bits on the end, which is an approach you'll still have to use sometimes, but where you can have the whole object within the from input into a select like this. This is going to be really easy to use. So further down, where we've just used JSON item as the expression, you can see now that we've got those result objects. So we've got an array of 3, so it's already in the right length. However, we've still got the problem that we're within an object with a numeric property. So really what we want is just this internal bit. Now in Power Automate, we could index into this object if we knew what this key was. But as this is dynamic and changes every time, we'll need a way of dealing with that. So that's what I've done further on in the flow. So let's take a look at that next. So in this select object with name action here, this is another select, the exact same XPath going into it. So taking all the properties under the result level as the from input to our select. And I've got a slightly different expression here. So again, we've got the same from last time, which was that whole object, JSON item. So that's taking the XML from the input and it's turning it back into an object. But then we're adding a property into this object, and we're going to call it key name. And the value of that key name property is this if expression. And actually, apart from the formatting, which I've laid it out a bit more easy to read, but that's the expression from this. So if we have a look what that's doing, for each XML item, the expression that we're asking for is the name of the object. So each one will only have one object at that level, and those are the the objects with the numeric keys. So these ones here. So each XPath expression is returning one object. So if we ask for the name of that property, it's going to be this. But unfortunately, it's going to be the XML version of that. In fact, if I wrap a name around here, oh, it doesn't like that. But if I do it this way, will it like it? So we can demonstrate. Yeah, we can demonstrate in XPath what these are. So it's returning these objects here. So this formula is taking that name and it's dealing with the presence of the Unicode character at the start. So if it starts with underscore x003, we know it's starting with a number in Unicode format. So this, the rest of this formula then basically takes out this whole part and then the other underscore from the Unicode bit and concatenates the rest of the string. Depending if there is the rest of the string, it could just be one digit here, which is what this first case deals with. So if it's just the length of the Unicode character, which is 7, including the underscores, it just gets that single character, which tells us the numeric value. Otherwise, it also takes that, but then it also takes the rest of the key afterwards. So that's just that expression. So we have a look here on Wikipedia for the list of Unicode characters. We can see why it works. So the digits 0 to 9 in Unicode all start with, well, in Power Automate it will be underscore x003, but then they have a single digit afterwards, which is the same as the numeric digit that we want to retrieve. So that's why that expression here works, because we're taking that single character, which is of interest to us, and discarding the rest. Oh, and I should mention that this fantastic answer was provided by Elliot Cole. Thanks, Elliot, for this fantastic solution. So, what's the output of this select object with name action? When we go back into the results, we can see that we've still got that whole outer object, but we've got an additional property now within each one, which is the key name that matches the key name returned to Power Automate. Interestingly, Power Automate's converting this back from XML and is doing the manipulation itself to turn that back into a Unicode character. I half expected to see these coming back with the Unicode characters at the front, but Power Automate is dealing with that itself, interestingly. So now we've got an array of these objects. We can use these to just produce the internal object if we want, or we could keep the key name on for context. But while this outer key is here, it's going to be hard to deal with because you don't know what this key is dynamically. So if we go to the next action underneath that, I've just split it out here. You can do this in one, which I'll show in a second, but just for ease, I've taken the output of that first select object with name into another select to show what we're doing here. So item is that whole object, the whole object from here to here now, including the key name. So we're going to take that item and we're going to look at a property within it. And normally in Power Automate, you'd specify that with a literal string like this. But here we're dynamically taking the key name property, which we've added to the object, and we're using that as the property we're looking at within the item. So doing that little expression there at the top will return this object here. So in terms of the results Ramesh had, that would fulfill that requirement. However, I've added another property to that again, which again is that key name. So we're just taking item key name because we've already figured out what that is this time. So that will take that inner object and it will add that key name property back in. So if we look at the output for that, you can see now we've got an array. We've got rid of that outer property and we've just got a flat object here with all the properties within it that we wanted to see, and we've not lost that key name property either. So we've got all the results we want. which is what we're trying to achieve. So that's brilliant. We've not used the word email ID or any of these other things anywhere in the Power Automate flow. All we've done is add in that key name which we've defined ourselves. So it's the same result in this object with name in one action here, and all I've done in that to save an action, although we're already saving a lot of actions compared to a loop, all I've done in here is do the same approach where we've added a property. We've got the item here, but rather than find the key name in the first step, I've not only found it here in the same way I have before, but I've used this same expression directly against the object in this same action. So yes, it's calculating the name here twice, but it's only going through all the items once. So this potentially more efficient, even though there's some duplication of the code within this expression here. So if you did want to see the way to get just the inner object, which outputs like this without the key, so the key was actually irrelevant and you just wanted this bit back, you can do that with a slightly simpler expression where we've taken the same we've taken the same input and we've just taken the item, turned it back into the item being the XML, we've turned it back into an object with JSON, and then we've gone into the object with the name of that property, and that returns just the internal part, which is this. So there's a few things I learned this week about XPath expressions in Power Automate. I hope you found this video really useful. If you did, please do consider dropping a like below or subscribing to this channel. So all that leaves for me to say is thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later, Automator.